It happened at my own engagement party. My stepbrother stood in the center of the living room, phone in hand, tears running down his face, and every single person I loved staring at me like I was a stranger. "She's been lying to all of us," he said, voice cracking just enough to sound believable. "Show them, Marcus." And Marcus, my fiancé of 3 years, turned the screen toward my mother. I watched her face collapse. I didn't scream. I didn't grab the phone. I just stood there in my yellow dress, with the little bow at the waist, the one I'd spent 2 weeks picking out, and felt the floor tilt beneath me. They believed him. Every single one of them. In under 4 minutes. What happened after that nearly destroyed me. But what happened 6 weeks later, when my stepbrother couldn't keep his mouth shut at the wrong moment, in the wrong place, in front of exactly the wrong person, that's the part worth telling. Stay with me. It gets louder from here. Growing up, I never thought of our house as broken. My mother remarried when I was 9, and my stepfather, Robert, was a quiet, steady man who fixed things on weekends and never raised his voice. I was willing to love him. I tried hard to love him. The problem was never Robert. It was his son, Derek. Derek was 11 when we met, blonde, blue-eyed, the kind of kid who knew exactly how to smile at adults and exactly how to look at you the second they turned away. From the first week, he understood something I didn't. In a house rebuilt from 2 broken ones, whoever told the better story won. And Derek was a gifted storyteller. The early years were small things. A missing $20 bill from Mom's purse, Derek's wide eyes, his voice soft with concern. "I saw Claire near your dresser this morning." A broken figurine on the mantel, his shrug, his sigh. "She was mad earlier. You know how she gets." I was a 12-year-old girl who still believed that truth was self-evident, that if I just explained clearly enough, people would see. I explained. They half believed me. I explained again. They got tired of the explaining. That was the first lesson Derek taught me without meaning to. In a family that wants peace, the one who keeps talking is the one who looks guilty. So I stopped talking. I got good grades. I ran cross-country. I stayed out of his way and told myself we'd both grow out of it. We didn't. By high school, the dynamic had calcified into something neither of us could name, but both of us felt. Mom called us oil and water and laughed it off. Robert said we were just very different personalities. Derek and I looked at each other across the dinner table and understood something our parents couldn't. This was not a personality difference. This was a long, slow competition, and I had never once chosen to enter it. He had. College gave me distance, and distance gave me peace. I studied communications at a state school in North Carolina, 3 hours from home. I built a life that was genuinely mine. A small apartment with a succulent I kept alive for 2 years, a part-time job at a campus radio station, a group of friends who thought I was funny and sharp and worth inviting to things. I breathed differently there. Easier. Like something had been pressing on my chest, my whole childhood, and I hadn't noticed until it lifted. And then I met Marcus. Marcus worked at the coffee shop 2 blocks from campus. He had the kind of face that looked like it was always just about to smile, and the first time I ordered an oat milk latte and mispronounced macchiato, he corrected me so gently, I actually laughed instead of going red. We talked for 40 minutes that first day. I missed my study group. I didn't care. 3 years later, he was kneeling in the parking lot of the state park where we'd had our first real date. Ring box in one hand, leads in his hair from a low-hanging branch he'd walked into 2 seconds earlier, and I said yes before he finished the question. We wanted a small engagement party. Just family, close friends, his parents and mine. My mother offered her house in Virginia. I should have said no. I know that now. But I was 28 and newly engaged and stupidly optimistic, and I genuinely thought that Derek was different now. He had a job, a girlfriend. He'd given a perfectly normal toast at Robert's retirement dinner 8 months earlier. People change, I told myself. I was wrong. The party was on a Saturday in October. Mom had decorated the backyard with string lights and sunflowers, my favorite. Marcus's parents drove up from Georgia, warm and generous, his mother already calling me sweetheart and asking about venue options before she'd finished her first glass of wine. Everything felt exactly the way an engagement party should feel. A little bit loud, a little bit emotional, fundamentally happy. Derek arrived late. He always arrived late to things he wanted to make an entrance at. I noticed him the moment he walked in, not because anything looked wrong, but because of the way he scanned the room before he smiled. Quickly, methodically, like he was taking inventory. I told myself I was being paranoid. I handed Marcus another crab puff and introduced him to my old high school friend Renee. An hour passed, maybe an hour and a half. I was standing near the dessert table when I heard Derek's voice rise above the music. I just think everyone here deserves to know the truth. I turned around slowly. He was in the center of the patio, phone extended, and his face was doing the thing I hadn't seen in years. That particular arrangement of eyebrows and mouth that looked like grief and actually meant something else entirely. Marcus was 3 feet away from him, already frowning. My mother was frozen near the French doors. "I've been sitting on this for a long time," Derek said, voice thick, "because I love this family and I didn't want to hurt anyone. But I can't watch her walk into a marriage without telling the truth." He looked at Marcus. "She's been lying to you about the money, about where it went." Marcus looked at me. "Claire?" "Show them," Derek said, and handed Marcus the phone. I crossed the patio in about 4 steps. I looked at the screen. It was a screenshot, a text conversation with my name at the top. A thread that appeared to show me asking someone named Jay to transfer money into an account I didn't recognize. The messages were specific. Amounts. Dates. A breezy little "don't tell anyone" low at the end. I had never sent those messages in my life. "That's not real," I said. My voice came out steadier than I felt. "That's not my number. That's not my name in my own phone." "It's your contact name in my phone," Derek said. "That's how I saved you." "We've never texted each other, Derek." "Pull up our actual thread." He looked away. My mother said quietly, "Claire, what is this about?" "It's fabricated." I looked at her. "Mom, you know me. You have known me for 28 years. She looked at Derek, then at the phone in Marcus's hand, then at me. And I watched something flicker in her eyes. Not disbelief exactly, more like exhaustion. Like some old file had reopened that she'd worked very hard to close. "This isn't the first time there have been questions," she said softly. And that was it. That was the sentence that ended the evening. I won't walk through everything that came after minute by minute because some of it is too raw and some of it is too humiliating, and all of it is the kind of memory that sits behind your sternum like a stone. What I'll tell you is this: Marcus didn't leave that night. He was confused and hurt, and he kept saying, "I just need to understand," in a way that meant he half believed something had happened. My mother cried. Robert stood in the corner with his arms crossed and said nothing, which was its own kind of verdict. Derek sat in the porch chair with a glass of sweet tea and said very little for the rest of the evening, because he didn't need to. He'd already done the work. Renee found me in the bathroom 20 minutes into the fallout. She sat on the edge of the tub while I stood at the sink, running cold water over my wrists, the way I used to do before cross-country races when my pulse got too loud. "It's fake," I told her. "I need you to know that." "I know," she said. She said it simply, with no pause, and that simplicity cracked me open in a way the whole evening hadn't. I gripped the edge of the sink and held myself together by the thinnest margin. The guests left early. Marcus drove home to his apartment. We talked on the phone for 2 hours, and by the end of it he was saying he believed me, but belief that has to be argued into existence is a fragile thing, and we both knew it. I slept in my childhood bedroom that night, in the same twin bed I'd had at 14, staring at the glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling that I'd never taken down, and I made myself breathe slowly and think clearly. Derek had created a fake screenshot. He'd staged a scene at my engagement party in front of everyone I loved, timed it perfectly for maximum damage, and then sat back and let the fallout do the rest. The question was why? And the question after that was how to prove it. The next 3 weeks were the hardest kind of hard, the quiet kind. No dramatic blow-ups, no screaming matches, just Marcus being slightly too careful on the phone. My mother texting to check in a way that felt like surveillance. My future mother-in-law going suddenly, conspicuously silent on the wedding venue texts. I went to work. I came home. I pulled up the screenshot Derek had shown on his phone. I'd photographed it on my own phone in the 30 seconds I'd had it in my hands, and I stared at it like it could tell me something. Then one Thursday night, my phone buzzed. It was Renee. Call me when you can. I have something. Renee worked in digital marketing and had spent the last week doing what she later called aggressive light research, meaning she'd pulled apart the screenshot methodically, the way you'd approach a client deliverable. What she found was small but significant. The font spacing in 2 of the messages was subtly off. Not wrong enough to notice at a glance, not right enough to survive close scrutiny. She'd seen the same artifact before, she said, from a screenshot editing app that was popular for faking conversations as pranks. The metadata on the image also showed it had been created, not captured, 4 days before the party. It wasn't court-ready, but it was real. I forwarded everything to Marcus that night with a message that said, I know this isn't proof yet, but look at the dates. He called me at 11 p.m. and talked for a long time. By the end of that call, something had shifted, not all the way back to what we'd had before, but enough that I could breathe again. What I didn't have was the why. I had the forgery. I didn't have the confession. That came from Derek himself. I didn't find out until later how it happened. I had to piece it together from 2 different people, and even then, some of it I only understood when Marcus sat me down at his kitchen table 6 weeks after the party and pressed play on a voice memo. Derek had a college friend named Patrick. They played intramural soccer together, stayed loosely in touch. Patrick had been at a birthday dinner for a mutual friend the previous weekend, and Derek had been there too. The birthday girl, a woman named Sonia, who I'd never met, happened to be Patrick's girlfriend. And Patrick happened to know me through Renee, the way that second-tier connections in a mid-sized city sometimes loop back on themselves. Derek had been drinking, not slobby drunk, but loose, comfortable, the kind of drunk where the story you've been sitting on starts to feel like an achievement instead of a secret. The timing was perfect, Derek said, at what he thought was a table of people who had no connection to me. She's standing there in her little dress all happy, and I walked in and ended it in like 4 minutes. He laughed. The table was quiet. I just needed them to doubt her. That's all it takes, right? Plant the seed. They'll water it themselves. Patrick's girlfriend Sonia looked at Patrick. Patrick, who knew exactly who Derek was talking about, reached into his pocket. Say that again, he said. My audio's bad. Derek said it again, more clearly, more completely. He explained the screenshot app. He mentioned the timing. He said, with the casual satisfaction of someone who's wanted to say a thing out loud for a long time, she's been the golden child her whole life, and no one ever checked her. I just gave them a reason to. Patrick sent me the recording the next morning with 3 words. I'm so sorry, Claire. I listened to it 4 times. The first time I just heard it. The second time I understood it. The third time I sat completely still and felt something I hadn't expected. Not satisfaction, not relief, but a profound and specific grief. Not for what Derek had done, for the fact that he'd wanted to do it badly enough to plan it. Badly enough to walk into my engagement party and dismantle it piece by piece with a smile on his face. What kind of loneliness does that? What kind of loneliness does that? What kind of hunger? I didn't answer the question. It wasn't mine to answer. The 4th time I listened, I picked up my phone and called Marcus. He came over that evening. I played him the recording. I showed him Renee's analysis. I laid all of it on the kitchen table between us like evidence, which it was. He went quiet for a long time, and then he put his face in his hands, not crying, but close. And when he looked up, he said, I'm sorry I let it shake me. It shook me too, I said. It was supposed to. We sat at that table for 2 more hours and worked our way back to each other slowly and carefully, like you'd cross a stream on stepping stones. Each footfall deliberate, each moment of balance earned. We were going to be okay. We were. I went to my mother with the recording and the analysis on a Sunday afternoon. I gave her advance notice. I said I had something to show her and I needed her to listen all the way through without interrupting. She agreed. We sat in the living room, the same room where she'd thrown my 9th birthday party, where she told me about the engagement to Robert, where I'd opened college acceptance letters on the couch with my feet tucked under me. Sunlight came through the gauze curtains and made patterns on the rug. I pressed play. She listened without interrupting. When it ended, she was quiet for a moment. Then she asked me to play it again. I did. She didn't cry immediately, the way I'd expected. She didn't cry immediately, the way I'd expected. She just sat there, very still, and looked at her own hands in her lap, and after a long moment she said, "I should have known, the first time, the very first time." I didn't say anything. I always told myself it was just sibling friction, she continued. I didn't want to see it as something deliberate. It was easier not to. She looked up at me. I chose easier. And I'm sorry, Claire. I am so sorry. I had imagined this moment many times in the previous weeks. In my imagination, there was sometimes yelling and sometimes cold silence. There was a version where I listed every incident going back to the missing $20 bill when I was 12. There was a version where I walked out. What actually happened was, I crossed the room and sat next to her and let her hold my hand. Not because everything was fixed. It wasn't. Not because the years of half-disbelief were suddenly erased. They weren't. But because she was my mother and she was telling me the truth about her own failure, and that's a harder thing to do than most people realize. I could meet her in that. Robert confronted Derek that same evening. I wasn't there for it, but Marcus was, because Robert had asked him to come as a kind of witness, and what he told me afterward was that it was brief and quiet and devastating in the specific way that a father's quiet disappointment can be. Derek tried to minimize it first. It was just a joke. She overreacted. I didn't think it would go that far. Robert let him speak, and then he said, "We will talk about what happens next, but tonight I need you to understand that this is not who I raised you to be. Derek didn't come to Christmas that year. Whether he'll come back eventually, whether repair is possible, I genuinely don't know. That's his work to do, not mine. What I know is that I stopped carrying the weight of that question somewhere around January when I realized I'd been using up energy wondering what Derek would do next, and I could spend that same energy on something worth building. So I did. Marcus and I got married in April. Small venue, 40 people. A bluegrass trio instead of a DJ because Marcus cried the first time we heard them practice, and that settled the debate immediately. My mother was in the front row in the light blue dress she'd agonized over for 3 weeks. Renee was my maid of honor and gave a toast so genuinely funny that his Georgia relatives were still quoting it at the reception 2 hours later. Robert walked me down the aisle alongside my mother, one on each side, and the three of us paused for just a second at the entrance. Not because we'd planned it, just because the moment asked for it. The evening was warm for April. Someone had propped the side door open and the smell of cut grass drifted in from outside. And at one point during the reception, I slipped away for 10 minutes and sat on the back step with a glass of water and just listened to the sound of everyone I loved gathered in one building. I thought about the girl in the yellow dress at the engagement party, standing on that tilting floor, watching her mother's face fall. I thought about how she'd stayed in the room, hadn't screamed, hadn't fled, hadn't let them watch her break, just stood there and held on to what she knew was true, even when no one else was holding it with her. I wanted to tell her it would be worth it. The months of careful steps, the evidence laid out on the table, the long phone calls, the Sunday afternoon in the living room with the gauze curtains and the patterns on the rug. All of it. Worth it. But I think she already knew. I think that's why she didn't run. I'm not the kind of person who ties things up with a bow. Life doesn't really work that way, and I've never trusted stories that pretend it does. My relationship with my mother is better than it's been in years, but we still have to consciously practice the habit of honesty that we didn't build when I was young. Marcus and I are building something real, but real things require maintenance, and we know it. There are still evenings when I see a notification from a family group chat and my pulse ticks up before I can stop it. Healing isn't a destination, it's just a direction. You pick it and you keep picking it. What I know now, the thing I didn't have words for when I was 12 years old, standing in my mother's doorway trying to explain a missing $20, is this: you cannot make people see you clearly if they've decided it's more comfortable to look away. You can only keep being exactly who you are with as much precision and patience as you can manage, and trust that the truth is a durable thing. It doesn't always win fast. It won't always win clean. But it's the only thing, when the dust settles, still standing. If any part of this story felt familiar, if you've ever been the one left holding the truth while everyone else held their comfort, I want you to know you're not imagining it. And you don't have to keep proving it forever. Leave a comment and tell me what you think. And if you want more stories about the moments that test us and the people who help us survive them, subscribe to Pearl Revenge. I'll be right here.